30 years of experience in global workforce technology in both the public and private sectors, and has been involved with IBM's knowledge management strategy since 1999 as part of IBM's software group. She currently is responsible for strategic direction as a member of many IBM communities, including IBM Cloud Computing, IBM Lotus Live, for online collaborations, communications, and click-to-cloud services, IBM Smart Workforce Research, and IBM Web 2.0 for business strategies across IBM geographic and divisional boundaries. Ms. Lord's scope includes the changing nature of work through 2020 from business, financial, and technical perspective. Her background includes industrial accounting and business management. Please join me in welcoming Catherine Moore.
So what I wanted to do, I was trying to think of what could I bring to your group that would be most interesting. So I didn't want to bring a bunch of information about products or things that we're offering. What I did want to do is share some of the thinking that we're doing right now about where we're going to be headed. One of the notes is that I wanted to ask the bloggers if they would please not blog this session. I'm going to be talking about some things that we're not going to be releasing or not talking about until September. So this is part of the Smart Work initiative, which is under the umbrella of Smart Planet. So I'll talk a little bit about Smart Planet, just to get started here. So Smart Planet is really it's a global initiative by our chairman, Sam Palmisano, and it's really about making end-to-end processes much more efficient and really stopping the waste. So, for example, I think I've talked to a few people here during the conference. One example is smart cities. And what we're doing there is we've got a smart surveillance package that we're selling that we patented. And we're able to start capturing video. And for example, we can start to do some shape recognition on it, and we can do some different analysis, and we can track whether or not, maybe it's a white van. And then we can share that information. We can catalog it, tag it, and we can start to share it across organizations. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today, is how do we share across, yeah, that's the one, thank you, across different organizations. So one of the things that we did, we have a whole bunch of these Smart Planet types of initiatives. The one I'm going to zero in on is called Smart Work. It'll be announced on September 9th, and there'll be a presentation on the 16th. And what it really is about three key things. One is change. How do you change organizations and processes? And the next one is collaboration. How do you get people involved and engaged in that change? And the third one is around the process itself. And this is the most important one to us. And I just wanted to, restate some of the what some other people have said this week. So Rick, you commented on the processes are far too rigid. We have to learn to work with the process. And that's absolutely what we're seeing. What we want to do is apply gentle pressure to the process and help it along. So for example, when we talk about collaboration now, thank you, we talk about CEBP, collaboration-enabled business processes. And how do we slipstream that in to the process? Doug from Triumph talked about, how do we get it baked into their process? So get something baked right in there. That's another thing that we're looking at. Dr. Neiman talked about focus on the work and really just zero in. What is that person doing? And how do we, deliver that knowledge just in time, which we were just speaking about right now. Chris from Hitachi talked about, focusing on the efficiencies of the process. So that's another thing that we're trying to do. So what we looked at was we said, well, I wonder what all the processes are in the world, and I wonder what all the processes are going to be in the world. And we had a little funny code name for it, and it was called eyeballs. What are all of the eyeballs that are on the processes? Who's looking at it? And we've really discovered some interesting things. So first of all, we're looking at everybody's eyeballs. So I'll show some slides that show, talk at a macroeconomic level that we're seeing so much movement towards interorganizational, inter-country collaboration. Even if that means building a road in the Midwest, that now involves global collaboration because the roads are now often financed by foreign companies, and they're operating on basically a toll basis, collecting tolls for 99 years. That's how we're able to finance new highways in the U.S. So what we're saying is that pretty much every process is going to end up, at some point involving stretching and pushing out those organizational boundaries and doing the same level of collaboration outside as they do inside. So we looked at everybody. We looked at the traditional information workers. We told ourselves, we promised ourselves we would not focus on the elite BlackBerry carrying knowledge workers, which were all in that class, that we would try and go much deeper, that we would look at the millions of workers that might bypass the PC. And then we got into the banking industry, and then we got into areas where, we're working with farmers. We may even be working with non-literate environments. So we really had to say, what are they looking at? What are they listening to? What are they touching? What's the device? And how are they collaborating? I love the focus on all of the intergenerational work. I thought Jay's presentation was the best one I've ever seen on retirees. Just that kind of level of research, it's really exciting to see that. And we're certainly seeing that retirees have a new role to play. An amazing percentage of online gamers are retirees, so they're learning some pretty interesting styles of collaboration. We're seeing some pretty neat things. We tried to get that connection all the way from the field to, I love the phrase we were talking about yesterday, touch labor. How do we get all the way from touch labor to the executive suite if we need to solve a problem or something needs to be communicated? And we really looked at knowledge in the context of this situational environment. Knowledge as a verb, knowledge just in time, knowledge as an intersection event, maybe with a very short shelf life, as well as the traditional knowledge that we've managed in all kinds of repositories. And we could talk about that. We have all kinds of methods that we're using to capture what we would call classic knowledge. But the thing that we observed is that the workforce is going to absolutely dramatically explode and change. It used to be, we're actually looking at the decoupling economically of, it used to be revenue was economically coupled to your SG&A line, to your workforce. And that's absolutely blasting apart. And what's happening is that you have a liquid kind of workforce, and you have people that are coming in and going out, just like in a guild in the gaming world. They join, they leave. They come for a project, they leave. They're part-time retirees, they come in, they go out. And this very sort of fluid movement. We're also deeply studying crowdsourced workers. What about when they're not even an employee? What about when they're just a group that you're bringing in? We're studying all these companies that the youth are working with, where everything's crowdsourced. Music's crowdsourced. There's no producers anymore. There's tremendous disintermediation going on. They buy T-shirts that only they design, from companies like Threadless and designed by humans. It's a very, very different world out there. So the other thing that we're looking at is from a more semantic point of view. How are we all, we're really all human sensors. So one of the things about the Smart Planet Initiative that I'll tell you a little bit more about, we're looking at 3 key words. Some of you may have seen some of these charts, whether it's the smart cities or smart healthcare, smart food, the amazing hamburger that comes from 16 countries that's so difficult to coordinate. This is my boss here, Bob Picciano, with the collaborative division of IBM. And he's really saying, this is it. Like, we really do have to call it. That's enough. We've got these overflowing attention management problems, and we really do have to find a way to work smart. So what we did is we went and we measured all the workers on the planet, all 1.4 billion of them out of the 6.8 billion humans on the planet. We sliced and diced the data sets by what they do, their age, their background, their culture, all kinds of different factors, the industry that they're in. We looked for patterns. We thought at first, our hypothesis was that if we sliced them by occupation, that we would be able to find patterns in how they collaborate. That's not what happened, actually. I'll show you what did happen. We measured about 80% of the global workforce. We started with 2006. We went back to 1998 to check data, and we went forward to 2016. And we used pretty much all public data sets. We used the CIA's material. We used China stats, India stats. We used over 40 different data sources.
On the previous chart, the line at the bottom
were the countries that we excluded, yes. Some of them that are, in different stages of political instability that we didn't want to skew the results. So we then looked at three factors. We looked at technology, the economic factors, and the workforce. This is the foundation of the Smart Planet initiative, which is really to redo everything or change what we already have, finding out where things are instrumented. So the big news is the PC is not it. The PC is, maybe this much of the problem. The other stuff is the telephones, the test and measurement equipment, the medical equipment, and the, anything that people carry, strap onto a belt. We looked at it, and so we're looking for all these kinds of digital instruments. We're also looking at the digital home. So when we have, aging parents at home, we don't want to lose work time to go and help them. We'd like to have an in-home, video visit. We also looked at projected shortages, huge in healthcare, major disaster. There is no way we're going to be able to take care of all the elderly people, even if we had the money to pay for it. We just can't do it. So probably what's going to happen is that we're going to have to outsource those jobs, probably to India, and that we're going to have a worker in India that is going to be talking to your parent in-home in video in the United States. So we're all going to have to get used to these different methods of collaborating. Some of you may have had your Burger King order already taken by somebody that is nowhere near the U.S. So we're starting to see this happen because there's terrific shortages, and they're going to get worse. So the other thing is that they're interconnected. So everything is interconnected, and we can get information from one device or one person. We start to not differentiate between a human sensor and a device sensor. We're looking at object models that include both of those. So you are an entity. You might be a machine, you might be a person. But how do we collaborate now? How do I pull you? How do I get information back? So the other thing is that once we know that, we can start to make those either human devices or sensors or the mechanized devices more intelligent. We also looked at cloud computing and the greening of IT. Those had some impact, but not a lot. This one was these two were the most shocking ones that actually varied the most. So this one here is a chart that came from The Economist, and they really showed that in 1950, which is the second or this largest one here. So this is the amount of the middle class, and the darker bar is the West. So the amount of middle class, which is defined by OECD as 20% discretionary income. That's when you start buying refrigerators, buying cars, and getting the economic machine running. In 1950, we had 60–70% of that middle class was in the West. In 2006, it flipped. So what does that mean? So that means that products need to be redesigned. Almost all of them. That means that a refrigerator that was really popular in the West isn't necessarily going to work in China or India. Different diet. Don't want the same fridge to freezer ratio. Got to rebuild it. Oh, You're going to change the ratio, got to change the compressors. Oh, change the compressors, got to change something else, got to change solenoid, got to change that, got to change that. And it gets very, very complicated and very expensive. So how is Whirlpool doing that? Well, Whirlpool is a great example. They realized they couldn't do it. They went into China and said, we want to sell refrigerators. Can we partner with your biggest appliance company? So now it's the Whirlpool Whirlpool Hisense actually is who they partnered with. So Whirlpool and Hisense are co-branding. In the East, they're not as sensitive. They're not brand sensitive like we are. They don't really care if it's a Whirlpool fridge or a Hisense fridge or a Whirlpool Hisense fridge. They just want a fridge. They look for value. So that was a great way for Whirlpool to get into a new market, expand their opportunity without having to really blow out, their R&D budget. So we're seeing more of that. This one here is absolutely shocking. This is the one I've been tracking the most. I think this is the most important thing to watch because it is changing the world. So we've been watching China, for example, and the allowable foreign investment that is occurring. So did you know that in life insurance, like we are talking about, a communist government, and you can actually have a foreign investment in certain industries, including life insurance, for example, 51% foreign owned. That's amazing. That means that all life insurance companies are now going to want to go in and go into China. They've got billions of new customers. So they're relaxing, and the time span is phenomenal. We're talking every 90 days something happens. So I'm looking for August. In August, the Chinese government is changing their mind yet again, and they're going to push out certain sized investments to the actual province level. They don't require the central government to approve these big foreign deals anymore. This is shocking. It's going to accelerate things like we've never seen before. The car industry, if anyone's watched the car industry in China in the last 26 days, they just overtook the U.S. to become the largest car producer in the world. And we'll probably see companies like Volvo sold to Chery or Geely. And there are 20 really big companies. And what else is China to do? China's been buying drivetrain companies out of Australia because they want to improve the quality of their products. They know that Westerners like better quality. So things are just really, really changing really fast. These macroeconomic things are going to affect us. The next thing we did is we looked at stimulus. We decided, well, let's go into the industries that are really rocking and rolling right now. So we looked at where all the stimulus dollars were. You can see the big lines up at the top. China has the most stimulus injection right now into their economy. So we simply went numerically into their databases and said, what are the biggest? Where's the stimulus going? What are the biggest workforces? We're looking for the most millions and millions of humans because those are the processes we want to look at first. So those were the economic ones. This one was some of the workforce. These ones I think you already know all these. This is the graying. We're seeing, it's getting more dramatic. Workers over 75 are growing at 86% year-to-year growth rate. Very high percentage. Digital natives we've talked about, and this one up here was a study that, excellent study, really worth reading, that UCLA, Berkeley did with Harvard and Kauffman Institute and a few others. And they did a study, they went to LinkedIn, and they studied all of the people that had studied in the United States, all the PhDs and postgraduates, and they said, where are you now and what are you doing? And that were originally from India, China, other countries that had come to study in the United States. And they got 92% response rate, which is incredible. I'm going to survey on LinkedIn from now on. That's really great. So that was a good tip. And what they found was that most of the graduates want to go home. They miss their families. They now have entrepreneurial opportunities that they never did before. And they're choosing to go home, which is going to increase our skill shortage in the West. But there was one very interesting difference. They still wanted to work with their friends in the U.S. Interesting. We're probably going to see some pretty interesting joint ventures, I predict, over the next decade. So, you know, when we look at all the leaders of all the technology companies in China, for example, they're all U.S. educated, and they all want to partner. So in terms of numbers, I'm sure you've seen some of these charts before, but we originally separated out the non-farm workers from the agricultural workers. These numbers are actually registered, you know, in their country, they're tax-paying farm workers, but we did separate them out because we want people to know, you know, how many real workers there are in industries from government to healthcare, to call centers, to, you know, telecom and so on. 132 in the U.S., 132 million, 350 to 500 in China. Very difficult to count because you can't tell who's a migrant worker versus an urban worker. The Chinese government still records people based on where they were born. So it's really, that's a range. You can't really tell. Their benefits are all accrued by the place where they were born. Even if they go to the city, they'll never get city benefits ever in their lifetime. In India, 200 million are growing. So it's just an idea. And this is a snapshot. So those were 2006, or most of them were between 2006 or they're fairly current, 2008, I believe. We talked a little bit about this, the middle class changing, and just wanted to point out the rate of change here. So, for example, India's middle class share of the population in 2005 was 5%. By 2015, that will rise to 20%. By 2025, 40%. So that means we're going to have an opportunity to produce lots of goods and services for a growing Indian middle class. So this was a chart. This was a project. A bunch of the distinguished engineers contacted me, and we worked on chat for a year, you know, building these frameworks. And we'd never met. We just all had the same idea. We were all going, where are all the eyeballs? Where, you're thinking that too. Oh, I'm thinking that. And so we just ended up meeting at night to online chat rooms and we formulated the way we were looking at things. So what we decided to do was to separate the type of worker. So red is knowledge worker, which is defined as a professional, it's the upper end of office workers and then all the professions like engineers, doctors, and so on. Anything from a manager, somebody with supervisory duties. The next one is a task worker, and a task worker is blue, and that's somebody that does an office-based task over and over, typically an insurance clerk, a government intake worker, something like that. So we use the NAICS classification for measuring all the occupations and grouped them. The green one is boundary. Actually, I much prefer the term. I think I'm going to ask the group to change it to touch labor, which I heard here during the conference, so I think that's great. So these are people that work with their hands. They're construction workers, repairmen, installers, loggers, and so on. And then the brown section is agriculture. So these first bars, if you can't read the back, it's Japan, the NAFTA countries, US, Mexico, Canada, the EU 27, Russia. Now whether you want to do a G7 or a G8 split, we did G7 in the presentation, but you can see if you want to go G8. Then Brazil, India, China, and emerging countries, Philippines, Vietnam. And so that's what the world's workforce looks like today. And most of these workers at present are servicing customers that they've never met or will never meet. The one thing you can tell about that pretty easily is that the majority of the workers are in the growth economies. By 2020, this becomes even more pronounced. We're still going to have, provided the stimulus plans pan out, we're still going to have a little bit of job growth rate that will even surpass some of the attrition we're expecting in the US and Canada. we're going to see a little bit of a bump, so about 10% increase in the West, which also includes Europe, by 2020, but we're going to see double that growth in the emerging economies. So we're almost going to be half and half. Probably by about 2025, it'll be half and half. So we'll have 500 million workers in the West, and we'll have 1 billion workers in the East. This number is smaller because I took the agricultural ones out. This is just the knowledge, task, and boundary. So the one thing to note is actually over here on this chart that 71% of the world's boundary workers, people that work with their hands, are going to be over in the East. So I think what we're suggesting is that there's going to be some changes in the workforce and the division of labor. We're probably going to have to work a little bit more closely together. 1 in 5 use a PC out of those people. 2 in 5 use a mobile. And I'll jump ahead a little bit to one of the conclusions. The one thing we were so surprised by after we surveyed, we went into China and we got teams in India, and we did one-on-one interviews with companies and with IT managers, and we were able to cover about a workforce of about 300,000 people. They're all large enterprises, so these are big companies in their countries. And we went across banking, insurance, government, manufacturing, apparel, and so on. But the thing we heard over and over and over was, I live on my mobile, I live on my mobile, I live on my mobile. Very little interest in PCs. It was really quite a surprise. And we heard very negative comments about things like email. And these are not what we started to notice was this very strange pattern. Well, isn't that why are they saying everything in China that the youth say in the US? We started to notice this odd kind of correlation between what we're seeing in emerging markets and what we're seeing in youth. And some of the behaviors, but not all of them, but some of them I'll show you. So what we're now asking ourselves is, well, if the products and services are going to change, and the touch labor is going to be here, and the knowledge workers are going to be in the West, and how are we all going to work together? How's that going to happen? How are we going to collaborate? So we're looking at how do we help them work smart, and what we're going to start to do is build communities that span across, or they're designed by nature to work across organizations. I was at the Burton Catalyst Conference last week, and one of the things we heard there was put up and tear down, put up and tear down. Just how fast. How can we build a knowledge management system and take a year doing it, and then we've got to put it up and tear it down, because these communities are coming and going. Everything's becoming more fluid. So we also realized that we needed to understand the cultural impact, that you can't design. We realized we cannot design software with our Western brains. We're going to have to really expand our thinking if we want to develop software that's actually going to fit. We're also going to need to really drive, it's a really good way to help companies drive innovation too. One of the examples here is in the music industry, where we're seeing things like the producer role. Don't need a producer, it's expensive. Just outsource it. Your customers will tell you which songs and which cover they prefer on the label. They'll figure it out. So a lot of jobs are going to disappear and change. And again, what we're looking at is how do we embed collaboration inside of a business process. So we've sort of come out with these trends, 9 trends in smart work. That's the logo you'll start to see in September, and there'll be a lot more depth of explanation around it. The part I'm touching on is only the little brown circle up there. I'm just concerning this presentation is around the collaboration piece, rather than the change piece or the business process piece. So the first one is that we need to provide universal access on any device. And we have to almost, from an architect point of view, we have to abstract that. So it has to be completely seamless. If somebody has a preference to get their message in SMS, great. If somebody has a preference to hear it in voice, text to speech, That's good. And somebody else might prefer it in email. Somebody else might want it on their social networking page. It really doesn't matter. You should be able to get it whatever way you want. What we did find, so for example, in Asia, so some of the findings that I'm putting on here, just to, I mean, we all know what the answers are in the US, but just to show you the difference in China, for example. So in most corporations, 4 out of 10 task and boundary work or mobile costs are subsidized. They're paid for by the employer.
What is that figure for knowledge workers?
For knowledge workers, we didn't, it's almost all paid for. Yeah, we found at executive levels in China, it's completely paid for, yeah. And it's about, the reimbursement is, ranges for task and boundary workers, about 100 to 200 renminbi per month, which is about $15 to $30 US a month. Some of them pay all of it, some of them don't pay all of it, but they're all paying, you know, most of them are paying for a good portion of it. Some of them give free cell phones to their employees, and then those employees usually give it to their family because it's a crappy phone, and then they go out and get a nice phone. But the majority of the enterprises, so 2 out of 5 today, told us that they identified mobile as highly strategic and as a platform of the future. So they're really designing for that. The other thing that was really surprising is look at the use of the mobile phone. Well, they're not talking on it, they're texting all the time. So texting was absolutely huge. And then we realized, well, there's texting, and then they could also do MMS. So because other cultures are much more visual than we are, they're sending photographs. And there's also trust issues. You know, show me that. Show me that. So you're always sending pictures all the time. So we're looking at technology. Well, how can I, send you an email and you can text me back? Like, we should be able to communicate back and forth, just to translate. Technology-wise, it does. So you'll see some of the new offerings around that. We also looked at age, and we've been talking about this throughout the conference. Most people under 25 don't look at email. You can pretty much say the same for overseas. Most workers overseas don't look at email. Again, they prefer the mobile. In terms of size, so what this one says here is these are workers that are, the average age in the G7 countries is about 46 right now. It's about 31. China's a little bit older. India's younger. India's about 24. But by 2020, it's almost going to be a full generational gap between the West and the East. So their youth population is rising much faster than ours. So when you look at, so this is relative, this is 100% to 100%. We have, under 44, we have about half, and they've got about, 80% or so. So, we talked at the beginning of the conference, yesterday, we were talking about Facebook and Twitter and all this stuff. And, what we're really hearing, when you look at the numbers, Kaixin and, Taobao and Xiaomi are really the big networks. And I think in 1 month alone, there were more signups than there ever have been to date on Twitter in Xiaomi. Xiaomi is mostly students, but this new one, Kaixin, only started in May 2008, and it's primarily used by business workers and professionals, and it's millions and millions of users, very fast growing. So maybe we should be thinking of how do we bridge Facebook to Kaixin, and start to figure that out. So there's a corollary in the East, and we're starting to learn about them. Instead of Google, it's Baidu. Instead of, eBay, it's Taobao. They pay their electricity bills and so on Taobao, and they pay with Alipay instead of PayPal. So, again, products all built by American-educated Chinese moguls. So this one is this one was the most shocking to us. So what we did is we took some of the main dimensions of what the cultural collaborative traits were. And we're what we're really saying is that it's important to start building, when we build these human networks, to make them work, to design them for cross-cultural. So some of the things that we found.
What is green and blue?
Okay, so the blue one is the West, and the red is the East. So just look at the difference in these cultural attributes. Individualism in the West, right up here. Me, 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 right? 5 recognition stars on my tagging thing. Wow, I'm an expert, you know. It's really good. Well, they would just kind of look at you like, huh? Why would you ever want that? There is no word in Chinese for ego, individual. There's no concept. The smallest unit of ego is either your family or your company. And so we were getting answers back on the surveys like, huh? Only when the river has water will the stream be full. You know, so we're getting back these really interesting responses. And they're just saying, well, we wouldn't like a system like that at all. And, you know, show me how I can help my team. Show me how I can help the report. The other thing that really varied, you know, so we're looking for variance here. So formality. Oh, man, this took me right back to the 70s. Everybody is doing a weekly report, a formal weekly report, and they're standing in front of the supervisors and they're presenting it. And they're posting it, they're printing it out, and they're posting it on the bulletin board, and they're sharing it. And they live by KPIs. I was so impressed by the discipline. And they share and compare, and they're very competitive, comparing their KPIs. So the formality, everything is printed out and signed off. And other things, like even on instant messaging, they go, I won't use instant messaging, but I would if you would tell me if my boss is too busy. If my superior is too busy, I don't want to interrupt him, you know, that would be very rude. So you would never do that in Chinese. So if we can provide presence, and whether this is a good time for a lowly person to interrupt a superior person, they're very, you know, still very formal there. It's very much like it was in the 70s, mid-70s here in the US. So we need to be respectful of that. Educational degrees, I think we only found one person in the boundary worker class that didn't have a university degree. Everyone has a university degree. And most people are working on multiple certifications, and they've got a very, very big surplus of students, graduated students, that they're still trying to work into the workforce. The other thing that was a big variance was sense of urgency. This one was really big. This one was one of the things that made it most difficult for them to collaborate with Westerners. And this was a sense of urgency. So when we say, I'll get back to you tomorrow on email, that's great, that's okay. That would be considered outrageously rude. No, I mean 5 minutes. They live in a 5-minute environment. It's 10 minutes at the most. 5:10, 5:10. You must get back in 5:10. So, you know, this was a really big difference. And, you know, something that we need to accommodate for. So how are we going to handle that with time zone differences?
What's interesting about this, if you put the union of this together and you build a collaborative world, you take advantage of everybody's strengths.
Isn't that fabulous? That's absolutely fabulous. And that's what I'm kind of suggesting, that, you know, if we want to really, another way to, I think it was, you know, yesterday we were talking about, it's not the young versus the older, the 25-year-olds versus the 50-year-olds or whatever. Maybe it's East and West. Maybe it's not East or West, you know. What can we do to elevate our, you know, maybe even getting a defense contract or something? Are there parts we can outsource that maybe would help us, maybe would be good, maybe we could make more money. So I think that's what everybody's trying to figure out in a big hurry. And we're seeing that, the place we're seeing most of that happen is Germany. Boy, are they ever getting it really fast. Beijing-Benz, Whirlpool, Hisense, you know. They're really, really moving fast on this within the last just even 18 months. So they're really getting these joint ventures, they're going for it. The other thing we found that was very different was the hierarchy of needs. So this is kind of your Maslow's hierarchy here. So, you know, in the West, we want, you know, we want meaning out of our work. We want to get meaning and recognition, and you know, and self-actualization and all this great stuff. Well, they want a car, and they want to maybe aspire to a house. And when they say they want a car, they mean they are going to fill 3 bags with cash. It's going to take them 2 to 3 years, and then they will go down to the car dealership and buy the car. It's a big day. It takes 8 hours to get big photographs at the end of it. It's a very, very big day for the family to get a car. If they're, and that's for the urban workers. If you're a rural worker that's just moving to working in the city, the government actually pays them to buy appliances. They're getting subsidized. And they're being told it's patriotic to buy appliances. So they want appliances. They want fridges and cars. And we're seeing that in the favelas in Brazil. We're seeing it in the slums. As soon as you hit that 20% mark, they want appliances. So we really have to know how to design for these new consumers. We asked them, oh yeah, there was one on the sense of urgency one. It was so funny. We were getting back responses where they said, boy, I think those people in Germany work on slow time, you know, and they're very annoying. So it was very interesting. We said, how do you prefer to communicate inside China and with overseas partners? And overwhelmingly, they said, we prefer unified communications. We only drop back to email and documents and attachments only when we need a business record. If it's just to communicate, thank you, an instruction or something like that, they prefer unified communications. Video, SMS, voice, any kind of communication technology. The other thing, these are just some of the companies that we've talked about that are, you know, combining. So global brain circulation could be a way that we can attract more skills and maybe use them to fill certain gaps. The other thing that we need to recognize is that security issues, and of course we have to work with the legal issues on intellectual property. But one thing that we found out is that they're really, really careful about access to their systems. They're just as worried about intellectual property. So VPN, people don't work at home. It's not allowed. You can't get remote access. You have to apply for permission. It's very different. The other one we noticed is, you know, we're starting to realize that the OS, the operating system, isn't really visible around it. They really don't care, which is why we've been developing this Eclipse-based open source technology. So, I mean, right now we're putting that in refrigerators. This is a screenshot of an Expediter application. So we're not really designing for PCs necessarily anymore. And of course, the next one here is just looking at mobile traffic. So IBM has invested $100 million, as some of you may have heard recently. We're starting to really develop for verbal collaboration on personal mobile devices. And this is the thing. The business is, because people are going out and buying their own mobile phones, we have no control. We no longer can say, oh, we want to develop for Symbian, or we want to develop for BlackBerry OS, or we want to develop for Windows Mobile. We used to do all those things, but now we have to develop for lowest common denominator, because they're consumer devices. It's the consumerization of IT. We have no control anymore. I think Melody at the beginning was talking about, you know, how do you combine 200 different financial systems, or you know, update them so they're the same. What we're saying is that we can't afford to do that. You know, we really need to use things like mashup technology to, you know, make it look like we have one financial system, even if we have 200. So we can spend the money on something else. We asked workers around the world, what are your key frustrations in trying to solve daily problems? And they told us that finding people is one of the most, you know, most significant challenges that they have. Time zone and language was second, and categorizing and finding information.
Do you mean finding people to hire, or finding people within their organization?
Oh, finding people within their organization that have the answer. So, you know, we could probably, you know, export a lot of the technology we have here. The software developer world is changing too. This is just a snapshot, actually, this is right now, it's in 2009. So most of the programmers are actually now in China and India, and they're mostly under 25. So they don't want to write C++. They want to use, Ruby on Rails and all these hot new things, and they'll be developing things from the gaming world. So, which is another reason why we're studying that. We talked about that earlier. So basically, we're looking at, we really think that this could be a way for organizations to generate more top-line revenue. That's what we're really focused on. Decouple that, SG&A cost, make more products, do more things with less. If we can make the world flatter and smaller, and then we can look at making it smarter. So we're going to be launching this. The website's up now. It's ibm.com/smartwork. And it's really an opportunity just to think and act in new ways. And we'll be looking forward to rolling it out. Thank you.
We have about 10 minutes for questions.
Recently, I had a device on someone else's computer so that I could have Wi-Fi, and I needed to call to get it fixed, and so I called the number, and I got a woman in the Philippines who then downloaded my desktop image and everything, set up my computers, told me what kind of computer it was working with, and all of that, in the Philippines.
Yes.
Within 10 minutes.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. It's great. We can all work together, and we can still, protect our home countries and do these things too. But we can also work together and do some really new and interesting things. I'm just going to leave this as a bit of a case study up while I answer questions. This was just one of our smart government charts. This is one of our first products that we put out that allows governments to come in and just use this cloud-based infrastructure with an instant put up and an instant tear down. It's just, we're really doing things quite differently now. Any other questions?
So when you look at the IBM, to the extent you can talk about it, what does IBM think of doing in terms of using the different, let's say, India, Chinese traits versus the Western one? Can you talk about that?
About the traits?
Of the workers?
Yes.
How they complement each other?
Yeah, I think that some of the things we're looking at are primarily around healthcare and banking, of course. IBM looking at how can we improve the process? So how can we make better banking decisions? We're trying to look at things from a macroeconomic level. How can we help the economy globally become more stable? And one of the things that we did find is in the microlending. And one of the issues that we're trying to help solve is there is a global intention to start reducing corruption. People actually, unless they're in the business of corruption, they want to, people do want to stop using middlemen and things like that. So we're really relying on it in the case of microlending. The farmers prefer to use more of a tribal type of collaboration, and they will teach one person in the village how to use all the phones, how to access the national soil database, how to apply for a loan, and then they talk directly to the bank. And they get the loan that they need, and the bank talks right back to the farmer. That can really change if we start taking out some of these, politically unstable elements. And what we're doing there is we're tapping into basically the good intentions of the farmer in the field. So that's a commonality. I think people have a common desire, just like we were saying, somebody gets up in the morning and says, I want to do a bad job. Everyone pretty much around the world goes, I want to get up and do something today, generally speaking. So we're trying to tap into that.
Quickly go back over the site, I think I was reading what you might find on the smart work. Say that's coming out soon. What kind of open source?
So it's it's basically it's a combination of technology groups across IBM, and I'll give you one example. So one example is in healthcare, and what we did is we took this desire to do presence detection and instant messaging, and we put it inside of radiology equipment. So rather than use a PC and say, I'm going to go do instant messaging on my PC, and then I'm going to go and get the radiology thing, and I'm going to go back and forth, we just put the instant messaging inside the X-ray program. You know, put it right in there, and then, you know, use tagging, find out 20 other surgeons, you know, that are familiar with that particular type of information. And this is where, you know, we'll have to see how the world's information databanks pan out. But you know, I think as Google was talking earlier, maybe it would be a good thing to be able to identify trends in disease, and you know, you could then be presented with this information in context. So everything in context.
Another example of the medical stuff, they got insulin pumps, which are deeper-sized devices which sense blood glucose, transmit the graph to the device, and then with the cell phone, communicate that to the doctor for instant diagnosis of what's happening.
Yes. Yeah, it's fantastic. We're seeing so much of that instrumentation right through to the source. You know, it's amazing. Even we did a project in the city of Malta, and we started to tap into basically reward customers that were not using a lot of energy. If they developed better energy-saving habits, that they would get a reduction on their bill. So they're getting direct, positive feedback based on an instrumental system. So itself, you know, that's where it becomes intelligent.
As you look into the future, it's already there. Do you see a point where language is actually an inhibitor for moving forward, or we got it
That's
around?
a great question, and the answer is no. We were so surprised. I mean, people said, no, that's no big deal. Most people around the world speak English, or are learning English, or we're trying to help them learn English. Most of the workers said it's no big deal. Spanish and Italian, now that's a bit of a problem. But English is not really a problem. And for a few people that do have a problem with it, specialists we found in India and China, they will have a translator. And I went myself and I took a program just last month with a whole bunch of business leaders who were flown over from China, knowledge workers such as ourselves, and so I took a leadership course with them in Mandarin, and I brought a translator with me. And I'm trying to learn Mandarin, getting there. But anyway, it's actually not that hard. And I just forgot about it. It was just kind of in the background.
But even as John said, the knowledge workers, but as you connect more of the labor aspects
Yeah,
across the
it wasn't a problem. They said, no, it's not a problem. English is fine. Yeah, it was really surprising. It was a really big issue.
What sort of changes do you see happening in regards to digital-based communication as opposed to text-based communication?
Great question. Visual is really, really big in topics. So visual is, for example, everyone that we surveyed in China said, you know, if they're working with Japanese partners, it's all video. It's culturally embedded in the Japanese culture to work in video, even between the U.S. and Japan. The customers do have to work in video. I think that is going to increase for everybody else as they start to become. We still have to get over a bit of a generational issue where, oh, you know, is my hair okay? I don't want to be on the camera and all of that. But the young people, they're losing that. And I think that in the West will just flow through. So I think that that's going to change fairly rapidly. Video's hot, yeah. It is.
And do you see major infrastructure changes to accommodate those sort of changes that are seen?
Yeah, actually, that is a problem because you really need to, you know, in a way, we need to stick with 3G because we're dealing in environments where, you know, they're dropping down to 20 degrees. So we cannot feed video, across the ocean reliably in all cases. We can still go through some dedicated pipes to do that, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time. It's just getting there. Cisco and so companies like that. Yeah.
I think talking to the Department of Defense about some of this stuff is
Well,
factual to the edge problem.
Yes, it is very much so, and that's one reason why I'm so glad to be here. We were the first group that has ever seen this.
Could you repeat the question? Something.
The question was, have we thought of presenting this to the Department of Defense? And I had to get a special permission to be the first group to see this work. I just thought it was such a great venue to see if we could get some feedback, and really glad to be here. But we'll start to roll it out. You'll hear more and more about it. I'm working with the Almaden lab right now, and they want to run with this. I mean, they want to build this yesterday and prototype it and show it.